Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, we're going to dive right into this one. When we hear the name Hercules, or Heracles if we're talking to the ancient Greeks, we instantly think of ultimate, just unyielding physical power, right? But there is a much, much heavier heroic burden to his story. Because despite his unmatched physical might, the guy couldn't escape a life of profound suffering and a really inescapable destiny.
So, this brings us to a core question, and it's one we really need to think about. What is true strength? Because the real tale of Hercules is far more dramatic than the popular myths you might have heard. It's this sweeping narrative, defined by impossible glory and tragedy, incredible victory and devastating loss. Ultimately, we're looking at a legend of unimaginable strength, and honestly, heartbreaking sorrow.
To truly understand the hero, we have to look at how he was forged. And his progression of power was nothing short of godlike, right from infancy. Being the son of a beautiful mortal woman named Alcmene, and Zeus, the ruler of the heavens, he was an immediate target. See, Zeus was married to Hera, a goddess famous for a fierce temper. And from the literal moment Hercules was born, Hera swore he would suffer. She sent two massive serpents into his crib. But instead of crying, the infant just grabbed them and squeezed until they were dead. Crazy, right? Then, as a youth, his power just exploded. Stories claimed he could literally uproot trees and completely overpower grown men. By adulthood, after mastering swordsmanship and military tactics, he was an absolutely unbeatable warrior. But unfortunately, that immense physical strength was on a collision course with Hera's relentless anger. Now, despite Hera's deep hatred, Hercules actually managed to build a beautiful, happy life. He married a noble woman named Megara, they had kids, and for a brief moment, it looked like he had finally escaped the goddess's wrath. But Hera was just biding her time, and when she finally struck, it brought about the absolute darkest night of the hero's soul. His life was suddenly split by this horrific duality. On one side, you have everything he had built, his noble wife, his children, his unmatched glory. And on the other, Hera's devastating curse. She inflicted a terrible, clouding madness upon him. Reality just vanished. And in a murderous, blind frenzy, he turned on his own family. When the madness finally lifted and he saw what he'd done, the strongest warrior in all of ancient Greece just shattered. He was crushed under a burden that no amount of physical strength could ever lift. The murder of his own wife and children. His fame, his victories, they meant absolutely nothing now. He was entirely consumed by unbearable grief and guilt. Desperate for some kind of redemption, Hercules sought out the Oracle of Delphi, and she gave him his path to atonement, the 12 labors. Now, we need to be clear here. These weren't just a fun list of heroic adventures. They were a brutal series of impossible tasks assigned by King Eurystheus to atone for unforgivable crimes. So the crucial takeaway is this. When we look at these famous battles with monsters, we have to completely recontextualize them. This wasn't some hero showing off for the crowds. This was a broken man on a desperate, agonizing quest to cleanse his soul. Okay, so let's look at the first impossible task, the Nemean lion. This absolute beast was terrorizing the region, and its golden fur was completely impervious to weapons. Swords couldn't cut it, spears literally just bounced right off. Entire armies had tried and failed. So what's Hercules gonna do? He tracks the monster to its cave, drops his completely useless weapons, and relies entirely on his bare hands. In this brutal, incredibly violent wrestling match, he wraps his arms around the beast's neck and simply strangles it to death. He then used the lion's own razor-sharp claws to skin it, wearing that invulnerable hide as his lifelong armor.
Moving on to the second labor, the Hydra. And this one proves his tactical brilliance went way beyond just having big muscles. This massive serpent lived in the swamps of Lerna, and its blood and breath were highly poisonous. Plus, if you cut off one head, two more grew back. So brute force was failing fast. Working alongside his nephew Iolaus, they put together a really precise strategy. Step 1, Hercules severs a head. Step 2, Iolaus immediately jumps in and seals that bloody wound with fire so it can't regrow. Step 3, once they finally hacked down to the one immortal head, Hercules sliced it off and buried it beneath a massive rock. Victory! And in a move of pure strategic genius, he coated his arrows in the Hydra's poisonous blood to use in his future battles. And the labors just kept coming, one after another, testing far more than his physical might. Chasing down the sacred Cyrenean hind for an entire year, that was a supreme test of patience. Then he had to clean the Augean stables, which were basically overflowing with decades of waste. He solved that by brilliantly redirecting two powerful rivers to wash it out, a total test of wisdom. And then there's the Amazon queen Hippolyta. She actually agreed to give him her belt peacefully, but of course Hera interfered, disguised herself, and started a massive bloody riot. Hercules had to navigate all that chaos, putting his leadership to the ultimate test. He fought savage birds, captured a fire-breathing bull, stole man-eating horses. I mean, it was just a relentless gauntlet of endurance. Let's move to the later labors, because this is where things build into the truly cosmic. While he was trying to retrieve the cattle of the multi-bodied giant Geryon, Hercules had to travel across deserts and oceans to the literal edge of the world. At one point, the scorching heat got so utterly unbearable that he did something incredibly audacious. He aimed his bow and fired an arrow directly at the sun. Now, instead of smiting him on the spot, the sun god was actually deeply impressed by his sheer, fearless audacity. He admired Hercules so much that he lent the hero a magical golden cup to help him cross the ocean. He was literally challenging cosmic forces and winning their respect.
Retrieving the golden apples was another staggering endeavor. These things were guarded by immortal nymphs and an absolutely terrifying dragon. But the craziest part? To get them, Hercules needed the help of the Titan Atlas. Now, Atlas's job was holding up the sky as a punishment from the gods. So, Hercules temporarily took the immense, crushing weight of the literal heavens onto his own shoulders, while Atlas fetched the apples. Just pause and imagine that cosmic endurance. Even among gods and titans, his physical capacity was entirely unmatched.
Which brings us to the final labor, arguably the most terrifying one of all. King Eurystheus ordered him to descend into the underworld, the realm of the dead, and capture Cerberus. And guys, this wasn't just a dog. This was a monstrous three-headed hound with a serpent's tail that guarded the afterlife. No living mortal had ever gone down there and returned. But Hercules did. Without using a single weapon, he wrestled this hellhound into submission and dragged it all the way up to the surface. When King Eurystheus saw the beast, he was absolutely terrified. But with that, the 12 laborers were finally complete.
But remember what we established at the very start. This is a story of inescapable sorrow. Years later, he married a woman named Deianira, which set the stage for a tragic deception. A dying centaur completely tricked Deianira, telling her that his blood was a magical potion that would guarantee Hercules' everlasting love. The horrifying reality, though, that blood was actually laced with the incurable poison of the Hydra from years ago. Deianira soaked a garment in it and gave it to Hercules. The second he put it on, the poison began burning through his flesh and bone. The pain was beyond agonizing, and this time there was absolutely no cure. There was no monster he could just punch to make it stop. Knowing his mortal end had finally come, Hercules ordered a massive funeral pyre to be built. He climbed onto it willingly, accepting his fate. And as the flames rose, the mortal, suffering part of Hercules was burned away. But the gods had been watching. Zeus looked down and recognized everything his son had endured, the sacrifices, the impossible victories, the unending courage, and so Zeus brought him to Olympus. The mortal warrior died in flames, but the immortal god rose. The man who had spent his entire life battling monsters had finally, at long last, found some peace.
3,000. Think about that number. For over 3,000 years, the name Hercules has remained one of the most recognized names in all of human history. Why? Well, it's not because he was flawless. Actually, it's exactly the opposite. He made terrible mistakes. He suffered greatly. He endured loss that is simply beyond imagination. But this number represents the timelessness of human resilience. No matter how many times a devastating, cruel fate knocked him down, he got back up. He kept moving forward. And that brings us to a profound realization about his legacy. To quote, "True strength is the ability to rise after tragedy, face impossible challenges, and continue fighting when all hope seems lost." True strength was never really about how hard he could hit a lion or how many heads he could chop off a snake. It was his emotional resilience, his absolute refusal to surrender to the darkness. Which brings us to the end of our journey today, and I want to leave you with one final question. When all hope seems lost, how will you rise? Hercules' story might be an ancient myth, but the challenge he faced is entirely human and incredibly relevant to us all. We all face our own monsters, our own tragedies, our own impossible labors. The true measure of our strength is what we choose to do the morning after our darkest night. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep seeking out the lessons in these great stories, and I'll see you next time.